Another upcoming season, another Bridgerton up on the marriage mart. Yes, people, my brain is still stuck on the 68-second clip that Netflix graciously gave us whilst reminding us that we still have to wait 365 days to get season 4. Thanks. I ate it. However, my rewatch brought up something. After I finally took my attention away from Benedict and how utterly lost and smitten he is at the sight of Sophie being so immersed in watching the chandelier at his mother's ball. And that is the fact that the minute he stepped into the ballroom, the whispers began around him, pointing him out as Benedict Bridgerton. Because you see, in the show, the Bridgertons, and by Bridgertons, I'm referring to both the Bridgerton boys and girls, are the hottest catch that anyone can get. And although there is the instinctual desire to wave it off as well, it's because of their wealth and the respect they have within their society that makes them such an attractive match. I think it goes a bit beyond that. Because to me, what makes the Bridgertons so alluring, so damn irresistible, is not just the money or the old title of Viscounts that the men in the family have held for generations, although that does play a role. No, for me, it is the security. Because as much as Bridgerton likes to kid itself and pretend that it is just a love story, the structure that the show and its pairings have taken so far prove that that isn't the case. And that the mother herself, Portia Featherington, was 100% right when she told Penelope, love is make-believe. It is only in your storybooks. Do you know what is romantic? Security! Now, to really understand the point I'm trying to make here, please note that when I say security as it pertains to what makes the Bridgerton so alluring to other members of the ton, I'm looking at it from 3 separate perspectives. There is the security that is tied to finances, i.e. having a partner who can provide for the household. Please note that this isn't limited to just the Bridgerton men. The women as well can fill this role quite nicely, and I will get to that in a bit. Then there is the security of status, because you need to remember that class and the maintenance of it was quite important in Regency England. It is why, for example, Eloise's attempt to dabble into radicalism was met with such stringent opposition and backlash when it was revealed, as she was temporarily branded a class traitor. Because radicals have always sought to level the playing field, which would have resulted in the redundancy and eradication of the titled and landed gentry. And they would never have that. And finally, there is the security to be found in family, specifically the family you are marrying into, and how it in turn extends that same security to your family. Please hold on to these 3 points as we will get into the importance of them and how the Bridgertons, by virtue of their status and the privileges they possess, make them such a brilliant catch in the eyes of the ton as a result of this security. Now, it is important for me to state at this point that yes, I am aware that Bridgerton is a romance show. I watch it for the romance and the lovely gowns and the drama, of course. I do love a good drama. But at the same time, there is a need to point out the fact that within the world of Bridgerton, which is set in Regency England, marriage is like a game of chess. Like, love is important and good and it deserves the narrative, yes. But I will be pointing out as we move forward how even though Julia Quinn, in creating these characters and giving us this romance, does indeed bring love into bear in their choices and decisions, every single one of her love interests still fill this criteria, whether they are the Bridgertons or the people they are partnered with. And we'll start with the fact that it is pretty damn expensive for you to be a gentleman of means in Regency England. Whether it is caring for your household or maintaining your horse and stables or clothing yourself or having access to exclusive clubs that fellow members of your class visit, all of this costs a ton of money. The same thing goes for the ladies, whether it is the monies that go into their general upkeep or the visits to the modiste to ensure that their fashions are always up to standard, because that is mandatory, as it is a sign of good manners and breeding to not show up in inappropriate attires for events. Please note the good breeding, as we'll come back to it when we're talking about families in a bit. But as I was saying, whether you're a gentleman or a young lady, regardless of whether or not you are titled, it is expensive maintaining the lifestyle that is accorded to you as a member of the ton. author of The Luxury and Silence, Susan Adriani, had this to say in a write-up for Quills and Quarters Publishing. More than likely, that gentleman, regardless of his wealth and consequence, will want a rich wife, one with a large dowry who will add to his coffers and enable him and his progeny to prosper for many generations to come. This rich wife of his should also be of good breeding and noble lineage, and come to think of it, of his own social class, or perhaps a step above. Keeping up appearances was important, as was status. There was a hierarchy to be maintained after all, and a man who married the right sort of woman, a woman of fashion, whose family frequented the same places and knew the same people as he did, would ensure his social standing within that sphere remained undisturbed and intact. And as I'm certain you can make the connection, it is not uncommon for these young men, therefore, to go in search of young ladies of the ton with substantial dowries to help pay their way for them. Case in point, Lord Ambrose walking up to Daphne Bridgerton in season 1, hoping to court her at her first ball appearance after she had been named the season's diamond. Anthony had to step in to point out that Ambrose is buried in debt and clearly is looking for a well-to-do wife to help offset that burden. Which might seem like a stretch, especially because Anthony did act like a jackass in the early parts of season 1, but he was right to exercise caution in that regard, as we see with Jack Featherington setting his sights on Cressida Cowper in season 2 with the hope of doing the same. Hell, even in real life, the reason why Lord Byron pushed so much to marry Annabella Milbank was because he was over £20,000 in debt and hoped that he would strike it rich with a settlement with her to pay off his debts. Marrying for love wasn't common, it wasn't even required, it was always strategic. And that is something that the members of the ton kept their eyes on, especially when it came to the Bridgertons. Young ladies from prominent families did not have to worry about their fortunes being squandered away by their husbands, since it is often their husband's responsibility to pay them a yearly sum from their dowry for their upkeep. Remember, the reason why Lord Featherington is able to have access to both Portia and their daughters' dowries, all of which he squandered, is because back then women didn't really have rights in their marriage, and their dowries therefore was to help protect them, but it was also in the care of their husband. So having a husband who is a Bridgerton meant that the young ladies had nothing to fear. Like, sure, all of them are hot as hell. Their parents have great genes. But what Edmund and the previous Viscount Bridgertons before him had in spades was good money management skills. And that is a skill that Anthony picked up from his father, because we are informed in the text that Edmund set aside good money for each of the kids that grew exponentially. Anthony makes this case to Simon when Daphne is about to marry him as well. Although, of course, Simon insists that Daphne's dowry be kept for their children, since he is not wanting for money and can more than provide for her. Which is a good time to bring up the fact that Simon Basset might be the love of Daphne Bridgerton, now Basset's life. But there is the added security of the fact that Julia Quinn wrote him as a duke who is quite prosperous and well off, and can comfortably afford maintaining his estate, keeping up appearances, and caring for his family with more than enough to spare. It is the same thing with Anthony, who is the Viscount Bridgerton and does have more than enough money to care for his family and his siblings as well. Plus, and this bears repeating, he is a Viscount, which means that whoever is lucky enough to marry him not only becomes a Viscountess, but also becomes the Dowager Viscountess should he pass on before her and her son inherits the title. That is the double whammy of security right there. That is packaged in the body of Anthony Bridgerton, and why he was such a hot catch. And sure, Colin Bridgerton is a third son. He, like Benedict and Gregory, fall within that space of not being the first son, which meant that they could not inherit the title and therefore had to find alternate path for themselves, which ideally they would have been forced to do by either going into the military or joining the navy or becoming a clergyman. The options for second and third and fourth born sons are pretty limiting. But remember, Edmund made good investments for his children, which would have had them easily be worth hundreds of millions of dollars each in today's economy when adjusted for inflation. So none of them were aching for work, which therefore meant that they could pursue whatever they wanted. And the women of the ton noticed this. Because do you know how stressful it is to find a hot as hell second son and realize that you will soon have to send him off to war? Don't believe me? Look at Marina's baby daddy. Died in a war because his father, Sir Philip Crane, is a titled one, and he had to become a soldier, which sure has some prestige, although joining the navy gives better prestige. But what is the use of marrying so young if you could become a widow so young as well? That is something else the young ladies had to consider, which I don't know about you, but there isn't really life security with being on the front lines. Having a husband like Benedict or Colin or eventually Gregory Bridgerton meant that you could have a non-titled husband who is still wealthy enough to pursue interests that will not put him in danger or force you to become the wife of a vicar, and at the same time not steal your dowry away from you. That is a solid match right there. And then there's the security in class, because remember what I said earlier? Marrying in Regency England is about either maintaining your class status or possibly boosting it. It is almost transactional in that way. And even though Julia Quinn and by extension Bridgerton the show likes to quote things in the sweetness of romance, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is reflected in the romance as well. Anthony and Kate marry for love, yes, but it is also worth noting that if Kate had taken the job as a governess, which would have automatically dropped her down into the worker class, which is just slightly above the servant class, it would have meant that Anthony would have had to step way out of his class to marry her. A situation that would have been near impossible because strict class structure dictates that you can only marry either within your class, just above it, or just beneath it. But the worker and servant class is a big no-no. And this is very important in Benedict's romance and why a certain decision was taken by Violet to ensure that Benedict and Sophie are able to get their happy ending in the book. I'm not going to say what was done because I don't want to spoil it for those who are only watching the show. But if you've read the book, then you know what I'm talking about and how class grants legitimacy for marriage and thus can determine who can end up with whom. That is how their society works. This applies to Daphne as well. Yes, she marries for love, but it is very convenient that her love has her move up the ladder to becoming a duchess. And for Simon, he's able to get a young lady of good breeding that is also within his class. Colin is able to marry Penelope because they fall within the same strata as well. She's the last daughter of a baron and he's the third son of a viscount. They are peers in that regard, and so although there is love, once again they are able to maintain the security present within marrying in their class. And the same can be said for Francesca and John. He's an earl and she's the daughter of a viscount and a sister of a duchess and viscount. Everything is in convenient alignment to ensure that the status quo can be maintained, their match can be secured, all with a sprinkling of love. And that is what you get with choosing a Bridgerton. And finally, whether you're marrying one of the Bridgerton boys or your choice is one of the Bridgerton girls, it all boils down to the fact that you are marrying into the Bridgerton family. And there is a security in that, in knowing that you're joining with such an old established line. That your in-laws are people of good conduct and breeding, who have been part of society and have never been excommunicated for whatever reason. The legitimacy that is granted the Bridgertons is therefore extended to you by virtue of your marriage to them, and sometimes even your family get to benefit off of that. It is why Portia, when the news finally sinks in for her, is so delighted about Penelope's match with Colin. Because now the Featheringtons and Bridgertons are bound in marriage. That elevates the Featheringtons in the eyes of the ton. You can never underestimate the power or desire for well-mannered, genteel relatives as a prerequisite for marriage in Regency England, as your family often does reflect on you and your choices. It is why Lydia's decision to elope with Wickham in Pride and Prejudice, for example, was so devastating to the Bennets and would have had such catastrophic repercussions if Fitzwilliam Darcy had not stepped in to help solve that problem and cover the shame of the action out of his love for Elizabeth. It is why Portia is so upset about Marina's pregnancy, as that action would have dire consequences on her daughters and their marital prospects, as it is quite common to paint the entire family with a dark brush off of the actions of just one individual who is related to them. The family you have matters. It says a lot about your standing in society, how well bred you are perceived, and the options available to you. To marry into the Bridgertons, therefore, even if you are marrying a fourth son like Gregory, is to tie yourself and your family to one of the most esteemed households of the ton. And of course, the young ladies or gentlemen would jump at that chance. Because marrying into a family, whether as a groom or as a bride, is taking on that family and its honors as well as disgrace as your own as well. And outside of Eloise's brief trip down into radicalism, the Bridgertons as a family are ones who pretty much toe the line and maintain the air of respectability that is expected of a family of repute within the ton. So yes, we get the love stories, but I do think it is important to know that it is not only love that Julia Quinn was working with when she created these characters that the show then decided to run with. She still had to toe the line and maintain the security that they would bring. All of which has led to the Bridgertons being that one family that everyone is desperate to marry into. But of course, those are just my thoughts. Would love to hear yours as well. Please drop them in the comments, whether you agree with me or not. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share it if you want to. Support me on Patreon if you can. Do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.